Welcome to the great Northwest and Northwest Brew Talk. I'm Mike Rizzo.
And I'm Michelle Rizzo.
This is episode 5. On today's show, we have an interview with Will and Mari Kemper of Chuckanut Brewing. We have our brew news and views. And to start today's show, we have some beer. We're going to open a Derby Lager by Pike Brewing in Seattle. All right, that's our hockey bottle opener, and we're going to pour this beer here. This is a 5.5% alcohol. It's called a California Common or a steam beer. So, check this one out here. It smells like beer.
It's probably a good thing to smell like beer.
Yes, it is. It has a pretty golden color and some carbonation. It's got some good head on it, and we're going to give it a test. That's a good beer to drink. All right. Well, let's kick off this show with our brew news and views. So the Austin Chronicle ran a story on February 6th that said that barrel-aged brewing is at an all-time high, but those needed barrels, well, they're at an all-time low. This trend runs back at least to mid-2014. Prices have doubled for oak barrels, and some believe the shortage may continue for at least another year. For distillers, that may mean installing new stainless tanks to hold their spirits until barrels arrive. And for beer brewers, they might have to wait for that extra bourbon barrel or wine barrel to make their next beer. Now, because of this shortage, smaller brewers might not be able to secure barrels, and those that do may be able to demand higher prices for their finished products. All in all, if you like cask-aged beers, you might want to get them while you can.
Barrels aren't the only shortage the beer industry will run into in 2015. Add barley to that. Barley is the grain used to make malt, and stories dating back to September point to an increase in prices because the heavy rains in the fall in Idaho and Montana left much of the crops unsuitable for brewing after the grain sprouted too early. The barley shortage could very well cause prices to increase for brewers, which may, wait for it, raise the price of your favorite beverage.
Of course.
According to USA Today, crop failures are not common, but do happen. There are other sources for barley, including Canada and Europe. Since most of the crops are under contract, there's not a lot of extra supply, which means some breweries might have to use some of the substandard barley and have to tweak their recipes to maintain consistency.
Of course. So we've got a barley shortage. We've got a cask shortage. So looks like it's going to be an interesting year for beer.
Sound Brewery from Poulsbo are in the middle of an expansion. According to the Kitsap Sun, owner and founder Mark Hood and his partners are building a new brewery across the street from their current facility and tap room. The new brewery will give Sound the capacity to produce 10 times as much beer and include a mash filtration brewing system that's not typically found at small-scale breweries. Mark Hood said, quote, "We're the first ones in Washington State to use this. It's a completely different way to brew beer," unquote. Sound's current output is about 1,350 barrels, and the new system will be more efficient using less power and water. The total investment by Sound is $1.3 million. They also plan on opening at least one more tap room, possibly in Seattle. We at Northwest Brew Talk want to wish you luck on your growth.
Awesome. Now, I don't think anyone thought that Anheuser-Busch InBev was done purchasing craft breweries, even after the low blow that they threw during the Super Bowl. Now, the latest brewery to say that they were approached by AB was Cigar City Brewing from Tampa, Florida. Now, the Tampa Tribune reported on February 8th that founder and owner Joey Redner confirmed that Anheuser-Busch approached Cigar City, but there was never a second meeting. Now, MarketWatch.com ran a story on February 12th saying that during an interview with Anheuser-Busch craft division head Andy Goehler, he said, quote, "We get a lot of calls, a lot of interest," unquote. He also said they are only looking for breweries on the rise, like Elysian and 10 Barrel. and, quote, #1 is making great beer, unquote. All the breweries they have so far purchased are in the 40 to 60,000 barrel range. If it makes you feel any better, according to MarketWatch.com, there are no other Washington breweries that fit their current criteria. Welcome back to Northwest Brew Talk. If you have not yet subscribed to our podcast, why don't you do it now? It's free. We're available on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, and some other sites. If you'd like us, review and give us a great rating, because that would definitely help us. Now we're going to try another beer here. We have a beer from Scuttlebutt Brewing Company in Everett, Washington. This is called the Homeport Blonde Ale. And it's a 4.6% APV, or ABV. Now, we're going to have a chat with the founders of Chuckanut Brewing. These guys, the talk was so good. This is going to be a 2-part interview. We're going to have half of it this week and half of it next week. This is Will and Mari Kemper and Chuckanut Brewing.
1984. I don't know if you've seen the video. That we recorded the news on our VCR, and then we kept it all those years. And then one of the students at the school put it onto a DVD, and then I thought, wow, this is Washington State craft beer history. Someone needs to have it. So I gave a copy to Nancy Jordan. She does the Craft Brewers Conference every year and the Great American Beer Festival. I gave one to those guys, the Brewers Association, but I also gave one to our Brewers Guild here in the state. And so they had it, and then they posted it. The state guys posted it. So now it is in the YouTube, Craft Beer Scene 1984. It interviews us in our small little Thomas Kemper Brewery, and the first pour of the beer in Seattle. But then it goes into craft beer history in Washington State. So they interview Paul Shipman. I don't know if you know who he is. Paul Shipman started Red Hook. And they interview him. And then at the, Charlie Finkel, who has Pike Brewing. You probably know him, Charlie Finkel.
Never met him.
This is a person to interview because he is full of interesting information about beer. And then they show the old Rainier commercials. And you probably aren't familiar with those, but there were the R heads. It was a takeoff on the cone heads. Saturday night. And there's also, they are sitting in their living room and they're trying to rope the wild Rainier bottles out on the range, but they're on. You got to see it.
Yeah.
I have your email. Oh, you could just, I think you can Google it and find it on YouTube. Yeah. But anyways, it's hilarious. But you watch through because there's all the static, because there were commercials or I don't know what happened. But anyways, there's static. And then all of a sudden it comes back on again. And it's like a 40-minute thing. Yeah, 35, 40 minute thing.
Check that out.
But it's very interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and you're new to Washington State, so it'll give you a lot of background.
Yeah, I'm an author. I've written 7 books, and my newest one is actually called Buffalo Beer. It just came out last week.
Buffalo Beer?
Yeah, it's a history of brewing in Buffalo.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I still have a lot of stuff to get out of my system from back home. So.
Oh, yeah.
So how many breweries were in Buffalo?
There wasn't a ton. At the peak, there was 37
That's pretty good.
in the city.
Wow.
At the peak.
There were 37 breweries around
In-
Buffalo.
In the city of Buffalo.
Isn't
In
that
the
amazing?
city of Buffalo.
Yeah,
It's
that was
kind of
just-
like Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, and then they by the late 1800s, they were whittled down to 19, and then after Prohibition, only a handful came back, and they were all gone by 72.
Wow.
So,
The history is interesting, besides just that aspect of so many in Buffalo. Look at around the turn of the century, as far as getting into the 1900s, 20th century. So I've seen some books about that, and that's how they ranked breweries as far as size and such. And the volumes weren't that great. At that time, Anheuser-Busch was something like 20th, 30th, or 40th in the nation, something like that.
Yeah.
So a bit of changes.
Well, yeah, doing some of the research, I mean, you see, you see history about those guys back in the 1800s when they were just Anheuser-Busch. They were working together, but, it was still, they weren't giants.
No.
But,
And what made them giants were their marketing capability in particular, and the fact that they're able to just, the technological changes around that time, is understanding thermodynamics and the chemistry behind it. They really stress that aspect over a lot of the other breweries, and they really did progress. And
yeah.
Oh, that's why you think AB got big, because
I think that's
one
of the reasons, because the technical capability, as far as bad refrigeration, all those things you put together. And if the operating philosophy is okay, let's maintain, let's be on the cutting edge. Let's really be sound in our approach. That really got them far.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Because a lot of breweries, especially competition around that time with bad spoiled beer, do you have bad spoiled beer? And if you understood that, then you can go ahead. But if you just didn't understand that, good luck.
And the refrigeration and being able to ship it further,
outside the community.
Yeah, that's one of the things that happened in Buffalo when they could ship in below cost just to fill the market. They just knocked the other breweries right out.
Oh,
that definitely helped to kill. I'm sure it happened in a lot of communities. It helped to kill the local brewers.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Carol Stout with Stout Brewing. Do you know them outside of Philly?
No, I don't.
Stout. She says, when she started, it was just a handful of guys. We lived in Philly, and Will started Dock Street for the people there. The brew pub they had with the brewery. And she was saying in those days there wasn't all that much competition. Now they have competition from outside the state in the area, and those people are taking away handles from the local guys because they can give you the advertising stuff.
You know what I mean?
All
that stuff.
They give you the signs.
The business of beers.
Way more than just beer. And quality.
Yeah. Well, when I say that we're here with Will and Mari from Chuckanut Brewery, just so we know who we're talking to.
Yeah.
But this is great stuff here that we're talking about. Beer history in general, and you guys are one of the pioneers in the area. So when did you actually open up?
We opened Thomas Kemper Brewery on Bainbridge Island around 1984. I say around because none of us really wrote it down. Okay. But at the time, there were only about 6 of us in Washington State. We were a small group, but we were the hub of craft brewing in America at the time. Because even though California may have had more craft breweries, they were separated, or they didn't even have
that particular
many.
time. The interesting thing, I recall looking at the total number of breweries, craft breweries in America, is less than 30, of which half a dozen were in Washington State. So at that particular time, Washington State had more craft breweries than any other state in the nation. Now that soon, with California in particular, then they. Yeah, then they
changed,
but actually, right now, I believe Washington is number 2 in the nation as far as total breweries, which is a fascinating
total. But I think per capita, they actually have more than California.
They do?
Per capita,
I
they probably do. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, they tend to be, Oregon, California, Washington, and Colorado. I think those are the biggest. With the numbers.
Sure.
But as far as production goes, Washington State is not, I don't think it produces as much as
a lot of small breweries.
Yeah. We have a lot of small breweries,
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, after that brewery, how long did that one last?
So we left Thomas Kemper in 1989, and that's when Will went to the East Coast to basically set up breweries or work with breweries that were already existing. In those days, actually, there were hardly any breweries on the East Coast.
It really started on the West Coast.
It did.
Pretty much so, yeah.
Like when you got to Dock Street, I don't think there was anything anywhere.
Well, there was a Sam Adams facility in Docks.
In Philly.
In Philly,
right.
rather.
It was
so
a
they'd
small
started
pub.
a year or so before, and but that was about it.
Yeah. And Dock Street was originally a contract brew, and then they decided they wanted to open a brew pub, and so Will organized their brew pub. That was the first brewery in a high-rise building also. So he's a chemical engineer by training.
Okay.
So he knows the engineering of these kind of things because, you're talking stacks and how you get rid of the waste and all that kind of stuff, which is all engineering. So
not the fun part of it.
Well, he liked that part. He's an engineer. They love the challenge.
It's just understanding it. That's the important thing. Is just understanding it. So it's not much of a mental block for me because going through so many breweries, you have a point of understanding. And it's we were talking earlier about setting up breweries, across America as well as overseas. Everyone is very different, depending upon let's say the regulatory things you have to address, the actual size and business setup, whether it's a brew pub versus production brewery. There are just so many factors that you can say, okay, yes, you can generalize setting up a brewery. Beer is beer. That's a wonderful thing. But the other but setting up different breweries elsewhere, some things might be totally king as far as the consideration, but they'd be irrelevant in other places.
So we actually before that he was working with Weeping Radish, which was in North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina, and while he was working with them, he actually set up this place that was called Fest House, I believe. Fest House in Virginia Beach. Of course, there was nothing else there at the time. That didn't last, the Fest House. I think it might have been open for 6 months and then it shut down. And then we were in Philly. He was setting that up. But then he got on the project Capital City Brewing. And on that project, they bought the equipment from Fest House. Yeah. And he had to they had to go through a big plate glass window to get the equipment out of that building to take it down to the first Capital City Brew Pub in Washington, D.C., and he did that one. And then after that one, he went up and did Lowell Brewing. It was also known as Mill City Brewing. That was in Lowell, Massachusetts. And then we returned to the West Coast, to Bellingham, actually. And he started working with, it was a group, they were doing what they called Beers Across America. It was based in Portland, correct?
Actually, around
just
Portland.
Outside Portland. Yeah. And they had this brewery in Woodinville, Washington, called Aviator Ales. And they had Northwest Brewing, and they had Orange County Brewing in Orange County, California, and they had Mile High Brewing in Denver. And we'll kind of...
We had one more operational at that time in New York, as a matter of fact, as Albany.
It was in Albany.
Set that one up.
Was it in Albany?
It's still there, yeah.
In Albany?
Yeah. And it's a big one in Albany, as a matter of fact, now. So setting those up, and so working with the breweries, and actually I was corporate brewmaster, so I was involved, overseeing every brewery, and just setting up some of these facilities, some of the brewing facilities.
Yeah, that was the early 90s, just to sort of give you where we are in history.
Sure.
That was the early 90s. Then in 97, Will was asked to put some brew pubs in Monterrey, Mexico. So we went down to Monterey, and we actually lived there. Will lived there about a year and a half. I was there about a year or so. We rented our house out here in Bellingham, and he ended up setting up the first 2 brew pubs in Monterey, Mexico, called Sierra Madre Brewing Company. And that was an experience. Will is actually fluent in Spanish, so that was a good thing because nobody spoke English. I don't even remember who your brewer was there. Do you remember the brewer?
I remember the brewer, brewers. Yeah.
Were they Mexican guys?
Or
there was
one we were trying to get somebody from Guatemala, which was Bohemia, Carta Blanca. So they were. I wanted to get them because they're technically sound, but otherwise it's just trying to find other people that might work in the brewing scene, biologists, chemists, people like that.
Science.
Yeah.
There were quite a few challenges there.
Yeah.
But it was a great place, and then they went on to make. I think now they have 7 brew pubs down there, plus a craft brewery.
Nice.
Because we saw the owner. The first year we went to the World Beer Cup, he was there as well.
When we were with Chuckanut. So.
That's when we had Chuckanut. Because we never went to the World Beer Cup or the GABF. They did have Thomas Kemper, one of the first GABFs, because one of our customers kind of took it there to that, and it actually won. I don't even remember so much, but he's in the picture wearing his Thomas Kemper shirt and stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. But then after Mexico, we came back, and we'll start. Well, meanwhile, while we were in Mexico, he actually was teaching brewing engineering at Davis, the school there, and that was, he'd go. They'd have him come up and teach for like a week.
No, it's 2 weeks. So,
2 weeks.
So for the programs, there's an American Brewers Guild in particular, and so what happened, because I was setting up breweries and brewing elsewhere, so I would go there for 2 weeks, and I'd address the engineering portion. So with the people taking the class, I would teach 6 to 8 hours a day of brewing engineering. So it was rather exhausting.
Oh yeah.
But
I'm sure both ends.
And he had a lot of those students. Are brewers today. I don't know if you know Hopworks Brewery, Christian. That was his student.
Okay.
Who else was your student? Was Donna at Silver City your student?
I don't know.
I don't think so. But there are several people that, because they used Will's tapes in their program, in their brewing program.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see. So that was Mexico. That was in late 90s. And then so he started working in like 98, 99. He started working with a group in Istanbul, Turkey. And we were living in Seattle at the time. And so first, when he's working with people, he does a lot of the engineering and the design work, like long distance via internet or whatever. But then when they got to the point where their equipment was going to be delivered, they said, we really want you to come over and actually set it up. This is Istanbul, which seemed very far away. And then 2001 happened, and they said, but we still want you to come. Yeah, 9/11, sorry.
Right. I got it.
But in 2001, we went over, after 9/11, we went to Istanbul, Turkey, and we ended up living there about 5 months. And that was quite the experience. It was an antique building on an antique street, so the street's very small. And the city of Istanbul is how many million?
15 to 20 million.
Yeah. So they only allow trucks and deliveries in the middle of the night.
Oh, yeah.
So in order to deliver these tanks, we had to go to the pub at like midnight. And this very colorful truck rolls up, and these 6 Bulgarians come out smoking cigarettes. And then they start putting on these big, like,
straps
and stuff. And they strap themselves up to this tank. And the one guy is leading the group, like giving them direction, to the right, but in Bulgarian. And they're carrying these giant tanks down 2 flights of stairs to where the fermentation room was in the basement. The restaurant, it was on 4 levels. So it started at the top was the mill. The second was the brew house. The third was bright tanks, or and then the fourth was the fermentation tanks.
No. So it goes sequentially, then brew house, fermentation, and bright beer fit.
Oh, bright beer was in the bottom.
Yeah.
So
And actually, then they carried them down, but the brew house had to carry up the stairs. So.
And then they call a break. And they all go sit down on the curb and smoke cigarettes. That's the part we liked. And then they go back in and carry the steak some more. It was the most amazing thing. Yeah. We'd never seen anything like it in our lives. And then afterwards, we all went and had baklava.
Oh, there you go.
At the baklavaria.
Yeah, baklavaria. Yeah, in Istanbul, there's stores, that's all they serve is baklava.
Really?
Yeah, different kinds of baklava. It's wonderful.
It's a fabulous city. And this was in the older part of the city. So we lived there, and then while we were there, we got to travel to Europe, and we got to actually taste these German beers that Will had been brewing since Thomas Kemper days. Mm-hmm. Because when we were Thomas Kemper, we had Helles, we had Märzen, we had Bach, we had Pilsner. I mean, we had all the German beers. We had also stout and porters. We were making the English and the Irish beers as well. So it was exciting to go and drink the beer in the place it was started.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we saw how traditional Will's beers are, how spot on to the style they are. Mm-hmm. You know, you could swear you were drinking one of Will's beers when you were in Germany.
Oh, that's great.
So that was really fun. Then we came back and we tried to resurrect the Dubuque Star in Dubuque, Iowa. It's an old brewery, again, before Prohibition. Mm-hmm. It was the largest brewery west of Mississippi. But that was way over our heads, and we ended up just deciding after 6 months that it was not going to be happening. So then we ended up traveling south to where his family lives in the Arizona area. And we were there, and he continued to work long distance with Istanbul. He flew back several times to work with them on problems that they had and stuff. And then they decided they were going to do a craft brewery. Mm. So 2 years later, I think it was 2 years, or maybe it was just a year and a half later, we ended up going back to Istanbul. First time we were on the European side. Second time the Asian side. Mm. And they put in a craft brewery. How many barrels was that?
So
I know it's hectoliters.
Yeah, 25 hectoliters, 20 barrel brew house. And then it went to double and triple and quadruple batch tanks. Mm.
Yeah, and that was a beautiful building. It was because they had bought the land and they were building on. They built. It was specific to the brewery. Mm-hmm. So Will did a lot of the design work with the architects. We ended up being there for 3 years, about 3 years, and during that time we traveled even more in Europe. So we got a lot of travels. Our daughter actually lives in London, mm-hmm. So we were going back to England and visiting different areas there. We actually met a great Brit, a guy named Mark, who's a brewmaster. He has this brewery. It's called Rebellion Brewery in Marlow, England, just outside of London. He came over. We kind of hosted him because Will was using
we were using a Maheen bottling line, and Maheen bottling that comes from the Tri-Cities, as a matter of fact.
Here in Washington State,
small breweries use them. So Mark was curious about Goyens. Goyens, is that his name? Goyens. So he was curious about using that. So he connected up with us through Maheen and came over.
Who was
and
an
stayed
old friend,
with,
Dave Maheen.
Dave Maheen's an old friend of ours too, and so we just set him up and things like that. So now whenever we go back to England, we can go there. We've had his brewers come here.
Yeah, his brewer last year came
there
here
to collaborate.
Yeah, and then our brewer who was over in Germany, he went to see Mark, and now we're going to go and maybe collaborate with Mark this year sometime, we hope. Mm-hmm. We'll see. But that was the plan. We were all talking about it. He's made huge strides with his brewery, and he's actually made a huge growth on it, on his brewery, so he wants us to see it because he's very interested in doing some lager beers, and he knows the quality of lager beers that Will produces, so he wants to get his take on it. But so while we were over there, we had a brewer that Will hired from America. He came over. He was living in San Diego at the time, but he had been through the Davis program. So Will hired him to be the brewer at the pub, the brew pub. And then he moved over once the craft brewery was put together. He would work with Will at the big brewery because they were no longer brewing at the pub, only at the craft brewery. And then when we left, we stayed in touch with Harvey. Kenny is his name. He now has, he is the brewmaster at a brewery outside of New Orleans.
Baton Rouge, I think.
Baton Rouge?
Yeah.
Anyways, the reason I'm saying that is because then we stayed in touch with him. We came back after Istanbul and we thought, we want to make our own brewery. Let's live in our house that we rented out all these years. Mm-hmm. And let's try to see if we can do it in Bellingham. Mm-hmm. And we found this space. We decided we'd rent it. And Will designed the small brew house. The intention was to make it a brew pub. Mm-hmm. We would sell all of our beer in the pub. Well, this was 2008. By the time we opened, it was late July 2008. A month and a half later, the financial crisis hit. Oh, yeah. Bellingham, being the small town that it is, kind of collapsed. Mm-hmm. Our business kind of collapsed. Mm-hmm. And we had to think quick, right, and try to figure out another way to keep us afloat. That's when we decided we would distribute the beer. So we started first in the Bellingham area. There wasn't enough interest. And then our friend who has Naked City, the Dons, they came up and got our beer. And they were opening Naked City. That was in, I think, January 2009, maybe. And it was a hit. Our beer was a hit in Seattle. Oh. So then we started taking the beer to Seattle. Right. And we got, quite a few accounts. And we ended up pumping up our production that way instead of serving it there. Mm-hmm. But we were still working here with the pub. And we went in 2009. That was our first foray as Chuckanut at the Great American Beer Festival. Actually, did we do a North American Beer Festival that year in 2008?
No, just 2009
no, we didn't.
As the first year we entered.
In 2009, we first started with the North American Beer Festival, I think, didn't we?
North American Beer Awards? No.
Yeah.
No, it was a GABF.
Oh, okay. We started with the Great American Beer Festival. 2009. Bam! We won 4 times with lager beers. We got 2 golds and 2 silvers. Wow. It had never been done in the history of the festival that the small brew pub, because we were only a small brew pub at that time, could win Small Brew Pub of the Year with all lager beers. Wow. We had the Pilsner, Vienna, Dunkel, and maybe the Schwartz. Was that the year we had the Schwartz? Hold on, I have it.
Vienna, Dunkel, Schwartz, and Pilsner.
I think it was Schwartz. Yeah, we had to look at the sign. It's on there. Anyways, that was a major coup.
All right, thank you to Will and Mari Kemper from Chuckanut Brewery. That was just part 1. Make sure you tune in next week for part 2 of the interview with them. Great interview. And what we'd like to discuss now is something that's been quite sad. If you've listened to the show before, you might know that I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, where there's a pizza store, pizza joint, pizza restaurant. On about every 6 blocks you can find another one.
I'd say every 2 blocks.
You're probably right. In some places, they're nearly on every corner. And pizza from Buffalo varies a little bit, but pizza was good. And when you get a large pizza, it's a large pizza. And if you know, wings, buffalo wings, as some people call them, wings and pizza go hand in hand in Buffalo. Well, anyhow, we have not yet found a fantastic pizza here in Washington. So we're going to spend 2015 searching for a good pizza. And to go along with that, we're also going to be looking for beer that pairs well with pizza. So if you have recommendations, we'd definitely like to hear them. And like I said, we're going to be spending time over this year, especially over the summer, trying pizza, trying beer, and trying to find the best pair that we can. So, that brings us to the end of this episode of Northwest Brew Talk. The show is produced and edited by me with engineering help from Michelle Rizzo.
And if you want to contact us, we are on Twitter and Facebook at NW Brew Talk, and you can email us at nwbrewtalk@gmail.com.
All right, you can also pick up my latest book, Buffalo Beer, The History of Brewing in the Nickel City, from your favorite online store. Until next time, I'm Mike Rizzo.
And I'm Michelle Rizzo.
Stay hoppy, my friends.